Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is the Finance Committee hearing for the February special town meeting. I'd like to welcome you all. Before we begin, Mr. Town Manager, could you just take a moment? It's not very often that we meet for zoning articles, at least not as regularly. We haven't done it in a while. Could you just, before we begin, introduce your team who's with you so that we and the audience know who we're talking to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start by acknowledging there are two select board members in the room. We have Dan Bennett in the audience and Gardner Trask at the table. To my left is Rodney Conley, the only non-member of the Development and Land Use team. He's our Finance Director. Brian Zacchelli is our Director of Planning and Economic Development. Tim Hudon is our Building Commissioner. And Aaron Henry is our Director of Land Use and Community Services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As is our custom, we typically begin with citizens' petitions. We do have a citizens' petition this evening. It's Article 10 in your warrant booklets. And if the petitioner could please go to the podium and present the article.
Thank you. My name is Michael Bean from Wenham Street. Sorry for those who've already heard this. Tonight I'm presenting to you a petition with 365 resident signatures to meet the criteria for a special town meeting. It has to do with the $200 trash fee, which is of great concern and apprehension. The folks that signed the petition either didn't realize the fee was already en route to them, they were wondering when we were going to vote on it, or were very unhappy about how this had happened. The obvious is the residents don't want to pay another fee, spike in costs, the jump in taxes, the electricity going up. All those items are creating a lot of anxiety for many. We understand there's a state ruling that allows the town manager to eliminate the town meeting in this costly decision, but it does fly in the face of our town father's intent. This does silence the residents' voice by this process. The fee looks and feels like a tax. It seems to be another attempt to get around the Prop 2.5 law, and it makes us feel as though this it questions the legitimacy of the current, this current exploit. One would have no choice but believe that this will occur again. There'll be more fees next year, and so on and so on. It's not going to end. Our town meeting would become obsolete, used in ritual only. We'd like, representation. We'd like to go through the process to get this through. Everybody understands that costs go up, but we do have a lot of questions about it. So we'd like to, the process to happen. Ultimately, looking for the fee to be rescinded. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I know I speak for all of us on the committee in thanking you for your time. I know citizens' petitions are a heavy load to carry, and it's not necessarily an easy task, so thank you for doing that. We are in possession that we received today a letter from Town Council regarding this, and before we proceed with questions or comments from members of the committee, I'd like to share just some of the highlights of that with the audience this evening. Town Council shares that this article conflicts with Mass General Law, Chapter 44. It improperly interferes with the Select Board's exclusive executive power, and it also improperly conditions the citizens' petition bylaw upon the enactment of a subsequent bylaw or amendment. Danvers Special Town Meeting cannot interfere with the executive branch on a matter which is within the exclusive statutory authority of our Chief Executive Officer, or in this case, the Danvers Selectmen, or Select Board, excuse me. The passage of the citizens' petition bylaw in its present form cannot affect any change. Rather, substantive change remains contingent upon the passage of a second yet undetermined bylaw. The procedural defect therein renders the citizens' petition bylaw incomplete, since full compliance with the bylaw may not be achieved until the occurrence of a conditional or contingent yet undetermined circumstances. In conclusion, the Attorney General does not review the policy arguments for or against the enactment. However, disapproval will be compelled where there is an inconsistency between the bylaw and the state constitution or laws. This is because a municipality has no power to adapt a bylaw that is inconsistent with the Constitution or laws enacted by the legislature. We received that letter this afternoon. There are copies here for the audience. If anyone would like one, you can certainly come up and take one. But before talking about the article itself, Article 10, I'd like the committee to take up the letter from Town Council and discuss the merits of that letter before we begin. Ted?
Yeah, I printed it out. I actually printed out a couple of the cases that were cited, and it seems pretty straightforward to me, and quite frankly, pretty logical. I'm not sure if you read, but I think the most salient sentence is the whole thing, is that a municipality has no power to adopt a bylaw that is inconsistent with the Constitution or laws enacted by the state legislature. So that, to me, I read the petition, that's precisely what this does. It seeks to take away a power that's granted in the executive board of the town and place it in the hands of town meeting, a body that meets once or twice a year for about 3 hours. To me, it seems no different than us entertaining a citizen's petition that makes a bylaw that bans future citizens' petitions. That's where I stand, and I know there's been some chatter that the petition was run by your own legal counsel. I'm curious if you have a prepared opinion on the legality of it.
No, I have nothing. I was hoping to hear that if it had been run by the Attorney General's office, but it doesn't appear that it has gone that far yet.
I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, does the Attorney General rule on hypothetical laws or proposals? So I don't think that happens.
Okay, well, I would like to say that the wording is taken from another municipality that dealt with this and were successful.
Which municipality, I'm curious?
I'm not interested in saying that right now.
Is it in Massachusetts?
It is in Massachusetts,
Which
yes.
municipality?
Yeah.
But you won't say which municipality?
No, I want to do some more research.
Interesting. I'm done.
Wally?
I agree with Ted's statements, just based on what the council reported. I agree.
Arthur?
So based on the law and looking at the law and reading the statute, it clearly does conflict. So my question is, and if we had town council here, I'd ask him this question. So obviously, if we vote no action, it's still going to go to town meeting, and town meeting is going to, perhaps, maybe they're going to vote in favor. What happens at that point? Does the Attorney General automatically review these, or does the town have to take an action to get the Attorney General to review them?
All bylaw would go to the Attorney General's office for review. They have a certain number of days after a town meeting to turn that back around. They can request an extension if necessary. And they do frequently come back with questions or comments on bylaws that have been approved.
Any idea of how long that process takes?
90 days.
90 days, okay. Any idea, Mike, how long that other municipality has been that passed this bylaw?
It was over a decade ago.
A decade ago, okay. So, I don't personally mind paying the trash fee. I also personally don't care if town meeting, if they could and legally could, voted to abolish the trash fee. That would be fine with me also. But I don't see that they can do it based upon this letter from the attorney that we hired to give us opinions on these issues. So in this particular case, I think he says that it's inconsistent, and it would not be inconsistent with the constitutional laws enacted by the legislature. So, I think that's pretty definitive. I don't think I can support it based upon that. I don't know if there's another way to do it, but based upon this That's my opinion.
Thank you, Arthur. Eric?
Mr. Chair, we're going to have further discussion after we talk about the...
Yes.
Okay, so I just echo what my colleagues have said. I won't add anything else at this time.
I'm in a similar position with the other folks on the board. This doesn't make any sense to me to pass this on in a favorable manner when we know it's going to end up, if you did get town meeting to approve it, it's going to go right to the Attorney General, and all indications are it's not going to stand up. I feel that the fee is justified, quite frankly. As a member of the FinCom and looking at budgets for years, there's just a point where we have to maybe impose a fee. You don't have to have your trash picked up. You can do it some other way if you feel it's necessary, but I voted for it, for the fee, and I will continue to vote for it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I know, Eric, you have some on Article 10 itself. We can start down there. Paul, do you have anything?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to comments now? Okay. So let me get my thoughts together. One, it is a lot of work, so I want to acknowledge and appreciate the effort and energy put behind it. And it's hard to hear a petition from residents with the level of concern that they have, and with what we are hearing from council. It's not the way to approach it. And so I certainly am not in favor of it, and think there's no action needed. But beyond that, I think regardless of where we vote today, there is a sense that something is being imposed on folk, and folks feel like, things are not fair. And I'm frustrated and concerned that our goals are not necessarily aligned. As Paul alluded to, our responsibility is to the fiscal health of the town, and there's a number of the time invested in reviewing financial data that has been publicly available for folks has been significant. And what we are faced by are increased costs, 60% increase in trash service, right? So 2.4 million, which we knew. We've done what we can to prepare for that. And our fiscal responsibility is to figure out how we absorb rising costs. In our lives, we know everything is rising, and the question is, how do we respond to that? This is the best solution, what we voted on previously to address that. Our budget, let me just get my notes here. Increase of trash services we talked about for years prior to approving the budget. We knew that it was going to have significant increases, and it was going to be very difficult. FinCom, school committee, library trustees, we met, we had budget conference committee. We went and really delved deep into this, so it's not something that is ill-advised or is without representation from residents. So I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that this is not something that we have taken up lightly. It's something that we've looked at exhaustively, would be the word. In those conversations, part of what we look at is either you raise revenue or you decrease your costs. Decrease costs in a budget like Danvers, where in any business, the majority of your expenses are going to come from two places, right? So as a business leader, you have staff, and then you have facilities. Those are when you look to manage your costs, those are the places where you go and get the most bang for your buck. In Danvers, we have, oh gosh, what are my numbers here? 79% of our budget is people, 19% is fixed costs. That doesn't really leave us a lot of margin for error, and if we are looking to cut things, I don't believe that reducing services is the way that we go, because no one wants their services reduced. We want what we currently have, but we don't want to pay more for it. And I agree. I don't want folks to pay more for it necessarily until you get to a point where you don't have other options. And so I just want to make sure that folks hear this is not arbitrary we just want to add to the burden of the taxpayer. I am a taxpayer, and when you are balancing a budget of an organization and institution, you have to look at the reality of your fiscal situation, and we haven't even gotten to this fiscal year's budget, which will be an additional challenge. We need to be prepared for that. The $200 a year trash fee, I will be honest, I don't think is excessive or out of the question considering the financial status or state that we are in. I think it's reasonable and fair, and given where we are, it's fiscally responsible, right? So that's the language that I would use. It's not out of the question for what some of our neighbors are paying, Beverly, Salem, Stoneham, North Reading, right? So there are other examples of this. This is not Danvers out on a limb imposing something that is unique. We could go the way of Middleton and pay $100 and some, to deliver our own to the dump, and no one would really want that, but we could save money, right, individually. Our responsibility for fiscal management is macro. It does have impact on residents, of which we all are, and we take that into consideration. And we know that at the end of the day, our budget is strained, our resources are what they are, and it's not in the best interest of the town to reduce services, for something that's $3. Well, so I have a chai, right? Cost me $3 or something, right? So one of these a week is worth saving $1 million some dollars, to the town. I mean, it's just not really, in the grand scheme of things, excessive, in my opinion. But, and I think there are things put in place to support those who have financial difficulties. So all of the things that are reasonable and practical to be put in place are in place and taken into account. But no one wants to pay more, and we get that, and I get that. But we operate with fewer employees per capita than we did a generation ago. In the conference committee report, we look at number of employees per capita decreasing, and several of our fixed costs, like the Essex Tech assessment and I think our pension fund, are increasing. Like, those are just our realities. And I really would ask those who are concerned about what we are doing to look at the full scope of it and appreciate there are things that are rising that we do not control, and the pie is only so big, and we have to really be thoughtful and conscientious, and I think we have done that. My last point that I would say is I and my colleagues donate our time and our expertise to vet lots of data and make informed decisions on difficult issues. I would like to think that we are not tone deaf to the concerns of fellow residents, because we are residents, and that our opinions in this matter, in these matters, are appreciated as not anything other than fiscal responsibility, because that is our charge. So I just want to acknowledge these are difficult discussions. It is citizens and residents exercising their right to voice their opinions, which is appreciated. As long as we are civil about it, we will do the best that we can collectively. And, we may not necessarily agree on these issues, but this is a really tough one. And I thank folks, but I certainly think it is not something that I can support.
Thank you, Eric. Arthur?
Just a couple more comments. Fiscally, I agree with most of what Eric said, but really my decision here is based on the law, because I really wouldn't have an issue if the town meeting were legally able to vote on this. I wouldn't have an issue with that. But based upon what I'm reading and some additional research I did myself after getting the letter, it seems clear to me that they can't. If there was contrary legal authority that you had, Mike, which came from the other jurisdiction, and it showed something different, I certainly would be willing, or would have been willing, to consider that. I don't know what happened in the other jurisdiction. I don't know what exactly was in, what the Attorney General ruled on. Looks to me like from this and some of the things that I looked up afterwards that this is accurate, and so it wouldn't matter if town meeting passed the citizens petition, it would not go through. So with that being the case, I can't support it simply because the law doesn't seem to support the town meeting having the ability to vote on this.
Karen?
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said so far. Going through the whole budget process, I know that we were aware the fee was coming. We had lengthy amount of time to go through the diligence of negotiating the quotes and making sure that the costs were appropriate to what we thought we could get the lowest possible cost to be. I know that we benchmarked against other towns, and we're running in lower costs than what those other towns are currently paying. I know that we were very generous in the fact that residents are able to get barrels for free, where we're currently having to pay them through our previous contract. And we all do have the option to opt out, right? If you don't like it and you think that you can find something else that's less, you have the option to opt out. So in that case, I move forward with no action, yeah.
Paul?
I'm just going to say I'm going with the no action.
Ted, anything else?
We can still ask questions, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, earlier you mentioned that the trash fee somehow silences the town father's voice. Can you explain what exactly you meant by that?
Well, I stand here in front of you, and I appreciate everything everybody says, and totally agree with much of it. It's not like we don't understand, people I've talked to don't understand the costs are always on the rise. I think as a layperson to the process of the way things work, that if you're going to add $1 million or more to the tax base, that probably should run it all the way through the course, meaning go in front of town meeting and allow people to talk about it there. It gives some more, it feels more genuine if it's gone through the process instead of, just one person at the top making a decision. And I'm not saying decision is wrong or right, I'm just saying it would feel more correct, and I think it would ease people's minds to know that they're adding this much more to the budget, that it went through the process. Obviously, we feel that other eyes are looking at it.
What gives you the impression that one person at the top made the decision?
Well, I've heard that the town manager said he used the Town Managers Act to get to do this, to make the decision.
You do know that we had a budget committee conference meetings for, 4 or 5 months?
Yeah.
That we had, 15 people on the conference?
Yes.
So, and then you do know that the select board voted in favor of the trash fee and accepted the recommendations of the budget committee. So, I'm not sure where we get the idea that one person just arbitrarily and autocratically decided to slap a trash fee on things. You mentioned that it's an end around Prop 2.5. That kind of implies to me that, I think you might have directly said that it was like cheeky or crafty. Do you know how many other towns in the state either don't provide curbside pickup or charge for it?
No, I don't. I do not know that number.
I think, is it 60%?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe around 50% of the communities do curbside. It's a much higher percentage in eastern Massachusetts. A lot of the communities that don't do curbside are in western Mass. And maybe 33% of those communities charge directly for versus having it in the levy, and it's on a sliding scale.
So this isn't something we invented to get around Prop 2.5 or any other perceived laws or traditions of the state. It's something that many other towns and municipalities have already had to face in the past 20-odd years. What else? So you mentioned that we should have a discussion about increasing fees by every time it happens at town meeting. What happens when costs go up by 60%? What are we supposed to do then? Yeah.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I think you need to communicate that, don't you?
I think I've been sitting on this committee for north of 5 years. As unpleasant as this cost increase was, it was the most telegraphed cost increase and overrun that I've seen since I've been here. They've been telling us for 3 years, at least, that our prior trash contract was well in the money in our favor, and when it came time to renew, there was going to be some sticker shock. It's not surprising to anybody up here that the costs increase. But where I'm going with this is, with Prop 2.5, do we all agree that it basically means you can raise your property taxes by about 3% a year without having to take it to the, for an election, for an override? Is that, do we agree on that?
You're asking me
Yeah.
if it goes up 3% a
So
year?
Prop 2.5, by and large, once you work out growth every year, it means roughly that property taxes can increase no more than 3%, or at least the tax levy at large can't increase by about more than 3% a year. Is that a fair characterization of the law?
I'm just all ears, I'm listening to you, I don't know.
But earlier you spoke quite with some strong opinions about Prop 2.5.
Yeah.
Do you agree that roughly it constrains us from increasing property taxes by 3% a year? Do you agree or disagree with that?
I know that it goes up at least 2.5, I don't know the exact number.
So when we have costs that go up by 60% and other costs that go up by 15% in healthcare costs, I wish we could provide for all the healthcare of our citizens in Danvers and not have to rely on the outside world for healthcare, but we all know that's not a reality. What are we supposed to do when we can only raise taxes by 3% a year and our costs are going up far north of that? Just generic inflation in the last 3 years is $1 in January 2020 is worth 83 cents in buying power today. What are we supposed to do as a committee when one very specific line item in the budget increases by 60%? What do you propose? Yeah, guess what? I don't want to pay extra money either. So we have a proposal here. We're going to walk down to town meeting and say, do you want to, thumbs up if you want to spend extra money. Everybody's going to say no. Okay, so what's next? What are we going to do? What do you guys propose? This has been worked on for years. What do you propose?
I'm not here to debate you, I'm just telling you that I talked to over 400 people in 3 days, and a lot of them didn't even know this was happening. They're residents, everybody's life is fast into.
Mr. Morose, if you could please take your seat.
So we thought we'd, question, the process. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm questioning the process.
Okay,
But I'm not on the finance committee, so I don't have all the numbers, so I don't know.
okay. So let me just tick through a couple more things. When we did this process, we had 4 different contractors bid on it. We even had to cut service levels, as people have noted, to get this contract in place. We still have a shortfall of about $1.4 million in our budget. The average town employee makes about $93,000, including the benefits. 78% of our budget is headcount, and about 19% are fixed costs that we have to service, like debt, insurance, things like that. So when people walk around talking about, just find stuff to cut, you're talking about people. That's 14 people. Who are you going to cut? When we have one very specific line item that goes up by 60%, and we have the ability to share the burden of that with all the people who use that service, it seems to me a very logical thing to do, to have a fee. This town we've had 5 town managers in 84 years. Generally speaking, I think we've been served well by, quote-unquote, leaving it to the experts to run the town and make recommendations on the best path forward. We have a AAA bond rating, and a lot of people like to beat their chest that we've never passed the Proposition 2.5 override. Guess how many we've proposed? Somebody take a guess. Anybody in the audience? How many have we proposed? 0. The answer is 0. We've never proposed a Prop 2.5 override. So after all this time, we're one of the few towns in the entire state that can say that. So after all this time and all this wrangling, if we recommend to exact a trash fee, maybe people should give the benefit of the doubt to a town that's been pretty well run for 80 years. That's all. I recommend no action.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the audience? Mr. Morose?
Thank you.
Jim Morose, town meeting member, precinct 3. Okay, just a few points. Number one, I understand that we've had all sorts of budget hearing conferences and meetings and things, and there were numerous citizens at those meetings who gave comments. I can't remember everything, but they did offer things that we should look at and things that we could do. And again, just because one line item goes up 60%, that doesn't mean that you get a 60% raise. That's just a small portion, numbers. So you got to look at the numbers. And when you talk about, one of the things I brought up at the budget hearing meeting, and other people did, we have to do, like, as Mark Zubrick and I have been saying for the last 2 decades, zero-based budgeting. You got to go back and look. I don't know how many things that are buried in the budget that we've done grants for, that we've got grants for, and we've done whatever, and we get these things into the budget, and then we pay, we get a grant, so we get $500,000, and then we do get 2 years, and then we have to do it for 5 years. So we have to spend $2.5 million to get a $1 million grant. It doesn't make sense. And how many of those legacy things are buried in the budget? We never know, because we never go back and dig and look. Now, we talk about the school budget. I know we can't tell the school budget, what to cut, what they can do, but I saw a report and a chart that said that since the year 2000 to 2022, the average increase of students is 7%. But the average increase of overhead for school overhead is almost 87%. Again, the school is loaded with these unfunded mandates and things that have gone on, and we got to go back and look, and we need to see what's going on. And the other thing is, you can look at the fact that, I know we talked, you mentioned it's people and it's services and infrastructure or capital that's our biggest budget. But, and again, in the dreaded private sector, we always look at, what's making us money, and so in the government side is, what are the direct services the people are getting, and who's not directly in line with the services that the town wants, and that's where we need to look. So it's not that we're not sensitive to all these things, but we all have to understand that, the citizens are facing the same 60% increases, the same rapid inflation rates, and some people aren't getting raises, and some people are getting laid off. And, as a town meeting member representing, the citizens, when I was collecting the signatures and the people I talked to, I was like, when does this end? When does it end? Okay, we wanted to put the CPA in, so if you add in the CPA, then you add in the trash fee, and then you add in the property tax increase, it keeps rising. So at some point in time, something's gonna break, so I guess we'll figure out what it is. And then when this goes to town meeting, again, I'm just gonna get up and say the same things, and I want this to be a litmus test, or whatever you call it, just a statement from the citizens that they're not happy, because they're not happy. That's all I'm gonna say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Bill, did you have a comment?
Bill Bradstreet, town meeting member of Precinct 1. I personally feel it's inappropriate to compare us to any other city or town in the state. This is Danvers. We're only responsible for Danvers, and it's up to us, whoever it is in Danvers, to figure out how we can pay for things. Don't say they did, this other community did this other community did that. That's immaterial, my opinion. What we're dealing with is what we need in Danvers as far as, in this case, trash pickup, disposal. We figure it out. We don't compare ourselves. I don't know how to answer your question whether it falls under one of the barriers or what have you, but again, it's up to us to figure out. Don't compare us, it's up to us to figure out how we can do the best job for this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Is this something that hasn't been discussed already, Mr. Trask? Go ahead.
So I understand that, I've been in this game a long time, as most of you have. We know the numbers better than a lot of people who may or may not. But I just want a couple of things that were said that I just wanted to comment on. The issue about silencing the townspeople. We run with a town charter and we run with a town manager act, and what has been done was completely within that town manager act. Now, I understand we may not have imposed fees before. That doesn't mean that the rules weren't there, that the game wasn't well known. It's that people didn't understand it, particularly that was an opportunity. But there was no silencing. This was designed by town charter and by the town manager act and passed by all the town meetings from that point forward. So comparing us to another town and suggesting the language is the same and the situation is the same 10 years later is not accurate. We don't know what that other town's situation was, so I agree with Mr. Bradstreet. We shouldn't compare ourselves to that other town. And Mr. Moreau said, look at the numbers. So if we look at the numbers and we say we have a budget of $138 million, and 80% plus or minus, and 15% plus or minus, 80% plus or minus on people, and 15% plus or minus, hairs of differences, leaves 4% of the $138 million budget for discretion. That's not people, that's not retirement, that's not contracts we have, that's the discretion that we use to buy things, oil, gas, lumber, whatever it is. That's $5.5 million. So when an additional 1.3 comes along, that's 23% of that discretionary fund. So think about, you've got to know the numbers. Which leads to the same point other members here, Mr. Blake said, this is going to cut people. People ask us to cut the budget. If 90% of it, 95% of it is already locked, and that 4 or 5% is discretionary, we tried cutting the budget. We tried saving money. We tried going to recycling every other week, and the uproar was enormous. And that was a service that people could or couldn't live with. If we tried cutting grass, if we tried cutting the budget for cutting out grass, people would go crazy. So it's very difficult, this role. If we have to put that, and by the way, if this were to go before a town meeting, if this were to pass, if the AG, if our attorney was absolutely wrong and the AG passed this, it doesn't do away with the $1.3 million. It just puts it in the budget, which means you're going to lose people. You're going to lose services and you're going to lose people, plainly. And as Mr. Blake demonstrated, it could be up to 14 people. And as long as I've been in town politics, there's only been one other time when we've suggested not having people. And the departments that was suggested for had the option not to take a raise or lose people. We're looking at all 7 of our unions having negotiations this year. We've all seen other communities where teachers are asking for 20 and 30% raises. I'm not suggesting Danvers will, but our employees work hard and deserve a fair recompense. And so they're going to ask for increases. That's going to further cut that discretionary fund. So the anger isn't about the 1.3, it's about how the 1.3 was initiated. And it was a fee that is allowed in the Town Manager Act. So for $3.85 a week, I'm willing to save 10, 12, 14 employees' jobs. That's one Dunkin' Donuts a week or maybe half a Starbucks a week. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Move no action.
Is a motion of a recommendation of no action in a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The article moves forward with a recommendation of no action to the town meeting. Moving on to Article 1, unpaid bills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Article 1 unpaid bills, it's on page 1 in the warrant booklets. The warrant booklet is on the town website. Under the town clerk webpage, you could find materials related to town meeting. I'll note now, in case anybody is watching at home and wants to get into the details, all of the materials that we will be covering tonight are on the town website. There are close to 300 pages of proposed changes and amendments to general and zoning bylaws. An offer was made to provide hard copies to town meeting. I think after a week and a half, we've had exactly one request. We printed a copy today. Most folks have access to the PDFs online, but we are still happy to produce hard copies if anybody would like one prior to town meeting. They simply have to email Ann Freitas in my office, and we can produce a copy for anybody who'd like one. So the warrant booklet, page 1, this is a very familiar article. Each year, typically in May, but because we have a special town meeting, we reached out to departments. Any bills that are not paid within a certain number of days after the close of a fiscal year must be approved at a subsequent town meeting with a 9/10 vote to make good on those invoices. I won't read them. They range in value from $56 to around $2,000, but we do have a short list of bills from FY '23 that are before the FinCom and then town meeting for approval. We're happy to take any questions.
Ted, any questions?
No questions.
Wally?
No questions.
Aaron?
No questions.
Arthur?
Nope.
Eric?
Nothing.
Paul?
All set.
Okay, any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move Article 1.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 1 passes. Article 2.
Article 2 is opioid settlement fund. Anybody who's followed the news in recent years knows that a series of class action lawsuits were filed across the country against makers of opioid drugs. Massachusetts is no different. Danvers was one of many communities that provided information as part of that process. And the recommendation in the warrant booklet is to appropriate the $178,522.45 that has been received by the town to date. The state is in the process of amending the law so that these funds can be treated like any other grant on a moving forward basis. But at this town meeting, a vote is required so that public health and the schools can put in place some programming that they've worked up together in response to substance abuse utilizing these funds.
Paul?
This $178,522, now, we're going to move that to free cash. This is what you're asking to do?
It's sitting in free cash, and this would appropriate it so that it can be accessed by the school department and the public health department.
Okay, so we're going to, yeah, okay, fine. I'm all set. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Eric?
This amounts to basically a pass-through. It's going where it was intended. No further questions.
Arthur?
Yeah, no questions.
No questions.
Paul?
This is all going for this year? Will there be subsequent monies coming from the
This is several
opioid
years.
for other years?
Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the 178 were the funds received in FY '23. Moving forward in FY '24 and beyond, as the manager mentioned, the legislature and the governor have enacted legislation that can just be spent without appropriation in the future. In total, between now and FY '38, we'll receive roughly $850,000 in opioid funding. Roughly 40 grand a year
Everything
moving
we
forward.
spend gather every year, you'll spend every year, correct?
Yeah, we discussed at the select board meeting, and I don't have the details with me, but there's a lot of latitude in how these funds are spent. In Danvers, the health department met with the schools and worked on programming that could be school-based programming mostly for how to use these funds.
There'd be no town funds in addition to this? And
There may be existing programming that this can beef up, but it would be separate from, this is programming specifically in response.
Ted?
You guys asked most of my questions. Do we have an option of like straight lining the expenses so it's like a more consistent program? Like if you said it's 800 grand between now and 2030 or 850 and we have 178 coming this year, that would imply that the average amount is going to be, well, you literally said it was going to be an average of 40K. So is there a way to say, okay, maybe instead of paying 178, we pay 50 and target some like more consistent consistent, constant programming?
Yeah, I believe we have discretion. So the 178 was a balloon payment up front.
Okay.
And then each year, we'll see 40,000. We can't spend in excess, obviously, of the money's received, but we're able to spend those as we see fit, once the funds are received.
Okay,
So we could stagger that and have an ongoing program. Yeah.
okay. I don't have any other questions.
Questions from the audience? Mr. Bradstreet?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I know we're going to get a lot of money. It's going to go in the general fund. And out of a period of time, it will be spent. When it's spent, will we be told X amount of dollars is going for this program coming out of general funds that were added because of this settlement? So I guess what I'm looking for is at some point, an explanation. We got the money, and this is what we're going to spend it for.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think, based on the dialogue tonight, what we would propose is to have either the health department or the school department or both include as part of their budget presentation. You can't hear me?
It's very difficult, I think.
Let me try again. Sorry, Bill.
I think DTAC needs some money from someplace to improve their equipment. If people don't talk into the mic, we can't. I like to sit in the back, but we can't hear clearly what you're saying. Thank you.
We will have the health department and the school department include as part of their budget presentations this year some information about how these funds will be used in the school so that we can answer that question for you.
Thank you. I think most of the people, or some of the people, would be curious to know where the money that we're getting will be spent. It's not going to be, if you pardon, it's not going to be paid out to cut grass. I think that's the main thing. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Motion to move the question.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 3, school transportation vehicles.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Article 3 is an amendment to a article that was passed at the May 23 annual town meeting. At that time, a request to replace 2 passenger vans for the schools was approved. With these vehicles, like a number of public works vehicles, we have simply not been able to buy them. The supply chain is so backed up. We've had a couple of orders canceled in the public works department. And in this case, the schools, working with the equipment division, came in advance of this town meeting to ask for an amendment to that motion so that these funds could be used to replace a school bus that is also in need of replacement. The vans will still need to be replaced at some point, but essentially they want to reverse the order of these vehicles in their capital plan. So this amendment would allow flexibility for that purchase to be made.
Ted?
So, to be clear, that shortage of availability of passenger vans is what's driving the request?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know when the bus was scheduled to be decommissioned or replaced?
The one that we're replacing now. It would have been presumably next.
Yeah, so, through you, Mr. Chairman, right now, they have no spare, so the minute one comes out of service, they're renting it at $400 a day. So this would provide them to
You need not,
age
you
up to
need
that.
not say more, okay. I'm done. Yep.
Aaron?
No questions.
Arthur?
No questions.
Eric?
Yes. Part of my question was answered because this is reversing the order of replacement. The root of my question, though, is about staffing. You know, I know that depending on what, given the driver shortage, it's harder to find a school bus driver than it is to find a 7D bus driver, right? So no opportunity for fleet shrinkage in the near future, I guess is my question.
It's hard to provide a general answer to that question. I think we certainly have had a hard time finding drivers. Part of the reason the Senior Center actually, in last year's budget, recommended that we stop delivering Meals on Wheels directly and go as part of a regional partnership is because we simply couldn't find drivers for our vans. The schools are no different. They're having a hard time finding drivers. We do try to maintain a balance where we have, within the schools and the senior center, a small fleet that we control. On the school side, they use that mostly for trying to handle the highest cost drives in-house, so weekend sporting events. If we can have our drivers handle those, we do, because we pay a premium to have the bus contractor out on the weekend. In terms of fleet shrinkage, I think that ratio is something that equipment and schools look at every year. But as the finance director said, right now, we have no spare, nowhere to look if one of them goes down, and then we'd be contracting more than we normally do.
Thank you.
Paul?
Did I hear correctly that we have 4 buses at this point? Is that what we have, or more?
No, just the two of the existing vans are scheduled for replacement. I don't have the number of buses off the top of my head.
Oh, okay.
For some reason, I want to say between 4 and 6. That sounds like the right number.
All
but
right.
I think we can
No,
circle
I'm all
back.
set, then. Thank you.
Anything from the audience? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Article 4.
Article 4 is an article that we see periodically, typically every 3 to 5 years. The Inspectional Services Department will canvass the region to find out how the fees that the department is charging stack up, both from a competitive perspective, but also in terms of the cost of process these permits, and are they balancing out with the time that is involved. And there's a summary in the warrant. There are some adjustments being recommended to the minimums that are charged by the department. There's a standardization of the cost per $1,000 in value currently on residential projects. It ranges from $8 to $12, depending on the type of work. That's complicated for both contractors and staff. So this would standardize that at $10 a square foot. There is an adjustment being recommended for the first time in many years to the electric wiring fees, and the deletion of a reference that is in our code and was there specifically for the construction of the Essex Tech North Shore Agricultural School. That was a $140 million project, and as part of that project, a reduced fee structure was approved. That project's been over now for more than 12 years. It's the only building in town that has language like that, and so really this is sort of this could have been under housekeeping, but we wanted to call it out. And I'm joined by Tim Hudon, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Paul?
If you would look at Article 4 and go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th, adjust other fees associated with larger projects requiring higher amperage or temporary services. Now, could you give me an example of what that might be?
So that is for electrical fees. So a lot of times there are certain things. It's hard to give you an exact example for that, but a lot of times if there's issues with transformers and things like of that nature that are above and beyond what we typically see, that would be an example.
Thank you.
Eric?
What do you project the budget impact of this to be, like when we were talking about?
I don't have figures for you on that. It's not certainly meant to be a large raise. Again, a lot of the minimums are going up simply just to cover staff's time. And with the residential fees, as the town manager had said, we're going from a range of 8 to 12. We're coming in the middle at 10, so we're not looking to certainly add to that, but more so just to simplify the fee structure at that point.
Thank you.
I would note too that that detailed analysis has not been done, but just based on the values we're talking about, preliminarily, there wouldn't be any adjustment. I'm looking at the draft budget in front of me. We collect about $1.1 million a year in permanent fees, and that includes more than just the building department, but this probably wouldn't register as a noticeable increase in revenue. This is really
Thank you.
just
That's
making
what I
adjustments.
Aaron?
No questions.
Wally? Ted?
No questions.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion? Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Article 5, the one I've been looking forward to the most tonight, is pool fencing.
Mr. Chairman, other than housekeeping, this might be the most interesting article we have tonight. I don't want to steal Tim's thunder, but we learned that the pool fencing bylaw in Danvers predated a state law and international code on the subject. And many years later, we found that the bylaw we adopted back in the 70s was inconsistent with state law. So this is simply a recommendation to standardize that.
Paul?
It says down here, you're going to go over you have to be over 2 feet, correct? Now, what type, is there any type of material that has to be used so that we're not just putting up things that are flimsy and will fall down or can be stepped over on, or, like chicken wire and stuff like that? What are the materials that have to be used?
As far as fencing, or as?
Yes, fencing.
Yes, so the code speaks about different types of fencing that are able to be used, whether it's stockade, vinyl fencing, whatever it might be. There's different requirements in the code for those specific fences.
Okay. But we are looking at something relatively sturdy.
Correct, yes, it's meant to be a permanent barrier.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Eric?
No questions.
No questions.
Aaron?
No questions.
Wally? Ted?
No questions.
Questions from the audience? Go ahead.
That's the... Third and last time. Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. When Danvers is not compliant with the state, is it our responsibility to check with the state? Are we doing the right thing, or is it the responsibility of the state to tell us, this is the standard, this is what you will approve and work with? I can't believe that it's this length of time has gone through with us requiring one standard, the state requiring another standard. When did the state approve this standard? And if they're supposed to, why didn't they tell us? Or if they're not supposed to, do we know that they're not going to tell us of all of the changes they decide to make, and we're out there floundering, not knowing what's going on or what has changed? If that makes sense?
I'm going to give you a general answer, and then Tim's going to give you a really good answer that he provided at the Select Board meeting. There are tens of thousands of pages of state law. We do from time to time have either in-house or outside help go through our bylaws to ensure consistency. Legal counsel does that periodically. We recently had a zoning consultant, and actually for one of the later articles, help us with that. As we discover these things, we typically do bring them back to town meetings so that we can get them amended. The state is not notifying towns and cities every time a change is made. The onus is on us to be mindful of that. We participate with state associations like the Mass Municipal Association, the State Finance Association, School Committee Association, et cetera. So there are plenty of folks who are paying attention to that. With respect to pool fencing, I'll defer to my colleague.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman. So the current codes that we have are from 2015. So the Massachusetts State Building Code is an amended version of the International Code Council's building codes from 2015. We are looking to get an update probably this year, if not next year, to a newer set of codes. But the reason, and I obviously I cannot speak to my predecessor and what was happening in the department before. It came to my attention mostly because it was a burden for the residents. What we had found is a lot of folks who were interested in putting a pool in would do the fencing one year, and if they couldn't afford the entire project, they would then do the pool the next summer. And the problem is that they were going to the state code, seeing that it was 4 feet, putting in a 4-foot fence. By the time they came around the next year and they would apply for a permit through my department, I would then advise them that they need to meet the town bylaw at 5 feet, and that is, of course, at great expense to them, especially if they had just installed the fence the previous year. Again, the state does not reach out to us. They do not tell us if there are conflicts with the local bylaws, and I'm not sure how they would even know that. So I think the onus is on us to, as it becomes apparent to us, to bring it forth as we are, to make the appropriate changes.
If we as a community invest in or go to AI, would that be a help to us?
I don't have an answer for you on that, huh?
I didn't think you did, but I wanted to put it out there and ask. It's in the newspapers all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradstreet. Anything else from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the article.
Motion to accept the article.
Yeah. Nothing. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Article 6 is in the warrant at the request of a property owner. The site plan, the easement plan on the screen is depicting 42 Summer Street. Folks may recall that was the subject of a lot of discussion last year. It was, at the time, owned by an adjacent nursing home. Nursing home had plans that they wanted to discuss for that building. Ultimately, the building was sold to a private party. That private party has renovated the home with the intent of selling it for its continued use as a single-family home. As part of that transaction, it was discovered that roughly 330 feet of the structure is located in the town right-of-way, which is a little bit disingenuous because the structure itself predated local zoning and rights-of-way by at least 150 years. And so when the town laid out its street plan, that plan encroached on the building. The request from the property owner, which is fully supported by the engineering department and staff, is that this be approved, which essentially will cure any defects with the deed moving forward. The structure is outside of any utility easements that we have. It does not impede on the sidewalk. That building, for anyone who drives that street, knows is very, very close to the road. But this article would cure the defect that they have currently with their deed.
Ted?
I don't have any questions.
Wally? Karen?
No questions.
Arthur?
Nothing.
Eric? Nothing. Paul? No? Anything from the audience? Yes, sir. Thought you might. Go right ahead.
I'm Alan Berry, 73 Center Street. I actually own 42 Summer Street. We purchased it to restore it and sell it, and during the process, we noted that a portion of the house is within the street sideline setback. The original house was built in 1715. The county layout was done in 1883, and the county layout line actually goes right through the house. So my guess is that the county engineer did not go in the field and check this out. The house stayed that way for the last 150 years, and we're just asking that that portion of the house that's in the road layout becomes an easement through the town.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move Article 6.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Article 7.
Articles 7, 8, and 9, I'm going to call in the cleanup hitters to my right. The first is a proposal for an adaptive reuse bylaw. The premise or the concept for this was actually proposed a year and a half ago as part of the discussion about the 42 Summer Street project. At the May 23 town meeting, the town moderator appointed an ad hoc study committee. Several members of that committee are here tonight. I'm looking at 3 in the audience, Dan, Lou, and Dan. And one of the recommendations that that committee brought back forth was this concept. So I would like to defer to Brian to explain what this bylaw would do, and then we would be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. As the manager said, this just came out of the ad hoc study committee that was from the previous town meeting. So what this bylaw aims to do is encourage preservation of buildings of a certain age. and to establish criteria for the adaptive reuse of the building, so doing something else other than its original intention, which is mostly single-family homes. This can expand options for property owners, so, and allows them to do different things if the building is considered eligible. So really, it allows for any building that's constructed prior to 1890 to be eligible to apply to the ZBA for a special permit. So the special permit process has, the process is not changing here. We're not doing a new process. We're just adding another way to get a special permit would be through this adaptive reuse. So it allows a use that's permitted in another zoning district, in the district where this eligible building is located. So the traditional thing that we would think of is that a nice old historic house that's still in very good shape, or maybe not, that's used as a multifamily structure or a single family, and the idea is that it could be turned into potentially a commercial use, or the point is a different use. So it could actually go from a single family to a multifamily, for example. The idea is that it would be allowed anywhere in the district. So it's not a use that's not already allowed in Danvers. So the special permit, in order for it to be granted, they have to still comply with all of the other zoning bylaw. So you don't get, there's no free pass of any kind. It's really just the use that you're allowing. The ZBA, though, because this is a special permit, the ZBA can deny it. If it's out of character with the neighborhood, if they're trying to, I don't know, put some big humongous parking garage, let's say, in the middle of a single-family home, like something that's completely out of character, the zoning board would be able to deny that under that situation. So this bylaw is actually pretty short. It's only about a page and a half, just explaining that you can apply for a special permit with the ZBA. And that is all I have for Article 7.
Great. Ted?
Can you give me an example of like a building, like, I'm just trying to think like of all the historical buildings I see in town, most of them seem like fairly like normal sized residential homes. And I'm trying to think through like a adaptive reuse that might make sense for them. Can you give me an example of like a building or a structure where like this?
Sure.
This could help.
So, depending, it's really this, like you mentioned, it's really the scale of that building. So these like smaller scale buildings, what do I see them turning into? Is that really the question?
Yeah, like obviously we don't put effort into stuff like this without having some idea of like how it could help improve the town or make sense. Like what do you have in mind?
So first, I don't have anything in mind. I think the point is giving a more property rights to an owner, essentially, is what this is. So what it could be a small store, a small shop, someone who sells their photography, someone who sells their art. A larger structure, you could turn into a bed and breakfast. You could turn into something that makes sense for the neighborhood. That's probably going to be the key, is that it has to make sense for the neighborhood. It can be denied. If a whole bunch of neighbors come out and say something, that it's possible that could sway the ZBA. So this won't, I don't see this as being I see this as being a benefit to the property owner.
And most of the pre-1890 stuff in town is residential, right? There's not like some school building that somebody could buy and say, hey, it's apartments.
I will say by far and large, it's residential. And of course, there's going to be some others, but by far, it's residential.
Okay. I have no more questions.
Do you have a number? How many buildings in town?
We do, actually.
Did a little analysis of the assessor's database today. Structures in Danvers, there are a little over 8,000 structures in Danvers, according to the assessor's database. There are about 682 of them that were built prior to 1890.
So 8-9%,
That's
something
about
like
8%.
that.
No questions.
So it seems like a good idea. You give the property owner some additional options, but it's still subject to all the regular zoning requirements, so something that just doesn't fit is not going to be going up there, so I think it's good.
Eric?
I'll just say, having served on the committee, that a lot of thought and work has gone into this, and so I don't have any questions, but it's something that I can speak to. The team worked really hard to bring something that made sense for the body.
I'm all set.
Anything from the audience? Dan?
Good evening. My name is Stan Gagnon, town meeting member and chairman of the Historic Preservation Study Committee. Just for the question with examples of some adaptive reuse, we have many different uses, again, depending on business or, structure size as to potential business reuses. I would think of on Elm Street, the North Shore Bank building. That beautiful historic structure used to be a single-family home. It's now the North Shore Bank. There are single-family homes turned into funeral homes in town. We have Glen Magna that was once a single-family home that has now become an assembly place, a wedding venue. For a small-scale example, at the intersection of Poplar Street and Locust, if you go a couple driveways up towards like Conan Street, there's a little chiropractic office, Pike Chiropractic. That's a little second Empire home. It's really not a big building, but it was able to be reused with just a couple parking spots there as that. And there used to be a small dentist office right by on that stretch as well. So that was sort of the vision and the idea. All of the examples I gave you either changed that way before we had zoning, so that's totally different, or afterwards. This is different in the sense that if one takes up this option of a special permit, you need to preserve the building. With those that happened previously, the example of a chiropractic office, which I don't mean to pick on, that use is with the lot. I mean, they could knock that down and have a different, similar commercial use. Whereas through this process, in order to open a little office like that, you would need to keep the historic building. So that is why it's different, and that's why it achieves a historic preservation goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the audience? Is there a motion?
I move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 8. Brian?
Sure. So this one's a few more pages.
Yeah.
So this is known as the MBTA 3A zoning. So the purpose of the new state legislation was to encourage communities to adopt zoning districts where multifamily, defined as 3+ units, zoning is permitted as of right. So this is based upon the need for creating about 200,000 new units by 2030 in Massachusetts and longstanding pushback of density from many communities. Danvers Town Meeting recognized the need for more housing in a very specific place and passed the downtown rezoning in 2020. That downtown rezoning in 2020 coincided with this state legislation. The regulations were not written at the time, but the point of the downtown zoning that was passed in 2020 aimed to comply with this law, the 40A, Section 3A. So what happens if we don't comply? Right now, we would know that we would not be eligible for a decent amount of funding through the Local Capital Projects Fund, MassWorks, and the Community One-Stop application, of which we have applied for a transportation master plan and a downtown mobility plan as of now. The types of funding that these programs fund have to do with street design, business improvement districts, master plans, pretty much a lot of things that come through this office, as well as DPW and as well as DPW and engineering. The funds range from about the grants range from about $20,000 to about $4 million. So the nuts and bolts of what this law requires. So we have to zone for 10% of our total number of units. We have 11,763 what's the terms, year-round housing units. So we have to zone for about 10% of that in this specific zone. So it's about 1,200 units that we would have to have with an actual density of 15 units per acre. So this 10% and this 15 that's what has to be code compliant. Those are numbers that are in the law, that are in the regulations now. They were not in the law at the time in 2020. And then over the course of a number of different iterations, there was more regulations came out. So Danvers doesn't have any transit in our borders, where we're considered an adjacent community. If we, that's why we're 10%. If we were inside, if we had transit, we would have had to zone for about 20%, so double the amount of units. The area in question has to be at least 50 acres, and it has to be in an area of concentrated development like Danvers Town Center. So this is the current zoning in the downtown right now. Town meeting adopted the Danvers Town Center and High Street zoning in 2020, which was started out actually in 2017. So in the blue area in the top part of the map, that is the 40R, otherwise known as the Smart Growth District. So that got passed in 2017 in order for this area to be a little denser, a little more affordable housing, with design and walkability being really important. And then in 2020, basically what happened is instead of expanding the 40R completely the rest, different subzones were created in order to create different types of pockets of neighborhoods. So the final guidelines for the MBTA came out in 2022, and then 2 more iterations in 2023. So this 15 units per acre, the 10%, all these actual numbers did not get actually put out by the state until about a year ago. So where this leaves us in terms of what we actually need to do. So the proposed district is just the entirety of downtown. So we're not changing any borders as part of this proposal. We tried to make it so it was as close to 15 units per acre over the entirety of downtown. So if we make it 50 acres, so right now there's about 87 acres for the entirety of downtown. If we just did the absolute minimum and just shrunk that to 50 acres, those 50 acres would be significantly more dense because we need to zone for 1,200 units. So it made more sense from a number of different reasons to keep the same borders and use the entirety of it to kind of keep the units per acre as low as possible. So that's where we came to this. The planning board, the previous planner, David Fields, Mr. Henry, got very, very, very close in being able to peg what the law was trying to do. So before they actually had these numbers, we were very, very close. Out of all the things in the downtown, there are some communities that have to drastically alter their entire downtown. We need to change a few numbers. So we feel lucky here, or I do. So we have to change the definition of multifamily. It can no longer be 4 units. It has to go down to 3. And really what we did here is match all of the numbers in the multifamily building to be the same for the downtown core and the live work. So it's 16 units in green is the same as the 16 units per acre in the live work. Same in the mixed-use buildings. So one really interesting thing that came out of our info sessions was that people definitely wanted to have commercial on the first floor. One negative part of the new law basically says that we cannot require commercial on the first floor. We cannot, which posed a real big problem for a lot of planners and a lot of people that want to enjoy downtown. So so the best thing I think that came out of these info sessions was people actually raising their hand and saying, can we incentivize mixed-use buildings so that there is commercial on the first floor? So what we did was made the mixed-use buildings slightly higher in almost all the cases. rather than the multifamily building. So we can't force commercial to go on the first floor, but we're allowing it to go a little bit denser if you do put commercial on the first floor. So what does this actually do to downtown? What's really the impact? So the average lot downtown is about 1/3 of an acre. So what that means is that currently, the lowest minimum that we have right now is in red, is 12 units per acre. That's on the books right now. So that minimum now is going to 15. It's basically the difference on an average lot. It's a difference of about one more unit. So not a huge game changer. Even if it was an acre, it would be a difference of 3 units. There were a few other zoning changes that we had to make other than the density. So one had to do with dwelling size. So the law specifically states that you cannot dictate how big a dwelling can be, how big, or other density limitations. That should be by the building code. So the building code dictates how big a livable unit can be. The other, I was just talking about this Danvers Town Center has this pedestrian frontage zone, which is just an area where commercial must be on the first floor. We just figured out we can't do that. So we've taken that out, and we cannot require commercial, we're just incentivizing it. The other aspect of it is parking. So we are changing one thing for parking. And the reason why is because in order to get a minimum of 15 units per acre, you can't really be over parking your units. So, for instance, if you have a 1,000 square foot lot, a very small lot, let's just say, and you're trying to build up, and in order to get to 15 units per acre, we have a cap on the height. You can't build 10 stories up. We also have open space requirements and parking requirements. So it shrinks that footprint, so you really can't get to 15. So because of that, and we actually are not seeing very many 3+ bedrooms in the downtown being built now. In the brand-new project, I believe there were 6 out of 142. But, so right now, 1 space per unit for studios and 1 bedroom. So that's what's on the books now, and that's what's going to be on the books in the future. That's not changing. Same for 2-bedroom units. 2-bedroom units are going to be 1.5 spaces per unit, which means some units get 1 car and some units get 2 cars. The only change is now for 3+ bedrooms, which again is less than, it's a few percent of the total number of units. But for the 3+ bedrooms, those now are, instead of being 2 spaces per unit, they are being reduced to 1.5. This proved to be a little bit emotional for some people. But that was really like the only real policy change. It's model, but I don't think I'm. So in order to determine if we comply with the state zoning, there's a review of the words, but there's also a compliance model that's in Excel where you essentially put in your entire zoning bylaw into this module. And what we found out was that, so it determines whether or not, one, these projects pencil out, number one, and number two, is it compliant with the law? What we found when we started playing with the densities and playing with the parking ratios is that when we had 2 spaces per unit for everywhere, you basically shrunk. It made our density. It made our density have to go extremely high, like 25, 26 units per acre, in order to get that, because so much land was getting taken up by parking.
Could you take up a couple slides where you showed like the green and the red? Yeah, this one. So on this slide, we're changing the minimum density requirement for 2 categories, and we're tweaking the multifamily to start at 3 rather than 2.
That's correct. No maximums are changing.
Okay. But because of the minimum density requirement being higher, on the next slide, you're projecting there to be a few more units overall in the district. Is that right? If you go to the next slide?
Yeah, so it's hard to, so the type of analysis that we have done is a build-out analysis, meaning that's not taking a little bit of by right projects and a little bit of special permit projects. That, a build-out analysis was done prior to the zoning in 2020. It basically said, if everything went to the max, can we support this? And that's how those numbers were done, in terms of how they got the maximum. Again, the maximum build-out is not changing. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think so. And that's like a combo of all the change, like the parking spot thing changing, all that stuff. That's the ultimate effect. Okay. I was just looking through the redlined document. On page 27, we struck a paragraph about non-conforming building retrofit. On the redlined MBTA Article 8.
I think it was just moved, but,
Okay.
yeah. Not stricken.
Okay, so that, if I look at, I should find that somewhere else in the
Yes.
document. Okay. And then we changed the maximum unit size on the workers' cottage. Is that because you're not allowed to count?
Yeah, we
that?
took out all of the size, anything that talks about how big a dwelling size can be, we had to take out.
The other question I had was on the language, it's in a couple spots about the commercial and stuff on the first floor.
Yep.
I had it in somewhere. Okay. I see why you changed the section, buildings fronting on the designated streets are encouraged to be reserved for retail, et cetera, et cetera. But then in the next one, it says residential and other non-residential uses not oriented to public access shall be allowed to have access at the street line by an entrance that leads to the upper floors of the building or the rear of the building. Does that sufficiently soften the language, considering that the term in front of it was changed to encouraged?
That specific provision is basically allowing you to get to a second or third floor through like a little alleyway on the front.
Okay.
So it could actually be a residential use that they're going to.
But it doesn't override somebody's ability to do something that's you're not encouraging on the first floor.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think, and I just want to jump in here too, there were several places in the red line version where shall became encourage. You just talk about how a planning department or a planning board is going to encourage versus enforce, because that's very different. And, it's certainly, it's sweet that you're going to encourage things.
It is, it's very nice.
I'd like to know more about the kindness of that encouragement.
Sure, it's pinpointed very specifically, and I'll show you where. So, Mr. Developer, I'm going to encourage you to definitely do a mixed-use building, because you can, on that acre parcel of yours, you can get 4 more units. You could probably, it's probably going to be better for everybody if you do that. So the only way we actually are encouraging it is allowing them to go to a higher density. That's all, and that was honestly the easiest fix. We didn't want to take the language out because we actually do want to encourage people to do that.
Yep.
But the only way we are actually encouraging is by giving them a little sugar by doing a mixed-use building.
Great, thank you.
And then
Ted, did you have anything else? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
one last one. The affordable housing requirements section, all the language about the fees is struck.
Yep.
Is that?
No, very good question. So affordable housing was in a couple different places. However, it's the same provision everywhere you are in town. There's no special downtown affordable housing rules. So you'll see it in my next, for the housekeeping article, we're putting everything that has to do to affordable housing into one section. So you just go there, done.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Ollie?
So our 1,200 units, these partially existing units, or these all new units? As our density goes.
Good distinction. So we don't, it's gonna be weird for me to say, but we don't actually have to create any units.
Right.
You have to zone for them. So we have to basically have a capacity in the zoning, just on paper. We have to zone for 1,200 units. We actually, it's not like getting credit, like a lot of people have asked me, So do we get credit for Maple Street, do we get credit for that? And it was like, well, kind of. I mean, whether it got built or it didn't, we already got credit for it, if that makes any sense. Because we set up the zoning to allow by right at 15 units per acre in an area more than 50 acres. So it's like, so that's the frame. It's a different kind of frame, because ideally you would want to build these units.
In your, do you have a contingency plan? You know, you've dropped your 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom to 1.5 cars. You know, a 2-bedroom would be a family, so let's assume there's 2 adults and a child. I'm kind of at 2 cars. Is there a contingency plan what to do with the other cars, because they're going to live there anyway?
I mean, the contingency,
Pretend it's not going to happen.
no, I think realistically, people should be very well aware on what they're buying, number one. Number two, that it's possible that many people that have a 2-bedroom, maybe they only have 1 car between them, and there's other spots, and then you can reshuffle those spots to other people in the building. I mean, there's ways to get creative, but there's not endless parking. Parking is also extremely expensive. But I think the mentality of, well, I'm going to downsize, and I'm going to keep 2 cars at this property in this smack dab in the middle of Danvers. Maybe that's happening, but maybe it's not.
So why would I assume I'm downsizing to go to downtown? You're trying to make it walkable, livable. I'm assuming that we're trying to encourage families to move downtown.
Of course.
Why would I assume that mom and dad aren't working somewhere, or dad and dad, whatever? That I have 2 people that aren't working within walking distance of the building. We already don't have a bus or a train or anything coming through, so we're going to have to provide transportation somehow. I'm very concerned that, even though at this point it's just zoned for it, if it's actually built, we're limited by square feet in the downtown area. Even with your side streets to park on, it's a most likely problem, not a potential problem. As we grow as a community, we're still limited to our square feet. And that's already the densest area of our town, which is why it works with us. But you can only expand out or down so far, correct?
No, I mean, completely. I mean, that's why.
Already limited up.
Speak into the microphone.
Can you not hear?
Yeah.
Sorry, is that Bill? Sorry.
I can barely hear you.
We've already limited our heights and our height restrictions. Our back roads, for lack of a better term, around downtown, really 1 car wide with a parking on one side. Charter Street, Oak Street, all of our surrounding streets, so we're very limited to our on-street parking once it happens. I understand that we're just so, but what do we do when the problem happens? We just say, deal with it. I'm kind of concerned with that because, we're a bedroom community. We've always been a bedroom community, which means in and out, obviously, so the transportation's a big deal. And without a bus or a train or some other mode of transportation to get in and out, and limited parking, and we haven't even gone to any businesses that are down there to get down, to visit a business. There's already a potential problem happening that it seems that we're kind of sweeping under the rug, for lack of a better term, so that I can get my zoning in for a number of units and pass the state litmus test. You don't see that as a problem?
I mean, Aaron keeps having, I could keep talking, but.
Yes, well,
yeah.
Well, before Aaron speaks, I think the project, there was discussion at the board meeting about the Maple Square project, and concerns expressed that there will be spillover parking from that project into the surrounding neighborhoods. I mean, the zoning that we have on the books, that process started in 2010. It was the first round of zoning for the downtown was adopted. So I got here in 2014. We were starting that process in 2010 with some of the studies to prepare to change the zoning in our downtown, which really dated back to the post-World War II era. And as part of that, we looked at parking in the downtown. We have about 1,700 parking places within a quarter or a half a mile, probably a half a mile radius of the center, the flagpole in the center of town. The zoning that was put in place where the Maple Square project is being built was adopted in 2017. The rest of the downtown was zoned in 2020. So that project is being built on the zoning that was adopted 6-7 years ago. And no analysis is perfect, but the analysis that underpinned that project approval may not capture 100% of the cars, but if it captures 80 or 90% of the cars, other parts of the zoning talk about tools and incentives for private businesses, private properties, the town, to get creative in sharing parking places. We may need more parking someday. There's also the potential to push for underground parking at some point in some of the projects that get redeveloped on High Street. And I think as Brian said at the previous meeting, parking has always been and will always continue to be a problem that has to be managed. But I think the expectation is that the project that's being built now will largely park itself. And if there is spillover, then we have some incentives in the zoning book to try to solve that problem, which isn't to say that it's going to be a perfect outcome.
Okay, so what do we do as, the Denver's Hardware project gets going? I mean, other projects get going in the area.
But they'll have to meet the same requirements that any other
Use the
project.
square footage though. I mean, my problem is I don't understand how we're gonna say, well, we can use X amount of spillover when we've already used the X amount of spillover.
So when you park a project, you can't take into consideration spillover. You have to park everything that you have.
I understand, and we're already kind of downsizing parking to make a unit work, project work. Are we not? I mean, we just went through that, we're dropping the number of cars down, units.
I think I wanted to, I would love to chime in, if I may, through you, Chair.
Mr. Henry.
Thank you. I think one point of correction, we're only modifying the parking ratio for 3-bedroom units and above. They're going from 2 to 1.5. 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units, the parking ratio is not changing. So that's an important piece of this. I think what is also being alluded to here is that we have had a redevelopment downtown that has created a parking problem for itself and its immediate vicinity. And I am not the zoning enforcement officer, but what we have learned through a conversation that we've been having with that property owner is that they seem to have oversubscribed, overpromised to their residential residents the number of parking spaces that were available, and that was quite clearly spelled out in the decision that they were given. And we are continuing to have a conversation with that property owner about how to bring them into compliance with their parking, with their zoning permit, so that we don't get a repeat of that as we go down the road. So with Maple Square, Danvers Hardware, for better or for worse, we're going to have to look a lot closer on how those property owners manage their buildings, because again, we thought we had a very clear decision on how many parking spaces could be committed to residential. And that building owner committed more than that, entered into leases for extra money for the second parking space. That was not how that was going to work. That's not the materials that was provided to the planning board at the time of approval. Yet that's what happened post-occupancy. So we need to do a better job of that, and we're working with that property owner to see if we can clarify that. But I think the broader point is, my wife and I, and our household has 3 cars and 4 bedrooms. We're not moving to Danvers Hardware right now. When the guy tells us we have 1 parking space and you'll have access to a second parking space from time to time, maybe nights and weekends, we're not going to be renting or buying a condominium or an apartment in downtown. But there might be another household that'll work for. We don't have to solve the problem for 25,000 existing residents of Danvers. We are trying to provide housing for 140 at Maple Square, 13 to 16 at Danvers Hardware. We don't have to find thousands of people that want that choice. We only need to find a few. So again, I understand we want all things to work for all people, but the fact of the matter is compact living downtown isn't going to work for everybody. And if your household doesn't want or desire these characteristics in the building, it's not going to work for you.
Can I ask one quick question? If you increase the minimum the density of dwelling units per acre, that makes 3 bedrooms less viable to begin with, right? Am I right?
I mean, I don't know about less viable. What I would say is that most developers from small potatoes on up, they don't even, it's hard to get them to build 3 bedrooms,
Right.
just so, I mean, it's hard.
But you're just counting dwelling
I mean, if
units,
you
right?
think
Or
about
what
it,
you-
right, I can, if I've
Yeah.
got a 10,000 square foot building and I want to do a bunch of 3 bedrooms, your marginal gain on that third bedroom
Right.
is not what you're going to get if you cut that all up into 2s.
No, I get that part for sure, but also just hitting dwelling unit minimums. A 1-bedroom counts the same as a 3-bedroom.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And from the affordable housing, I mean, all that piles up. We've, for better or for worse, learned a lot through this compliance module that we've had to pump all this stuff into of how the tweaking one dial can really affect negatively the pro forma, so.
So assuming that all of this works just like you planned, how many additional units will be in the downtown area? From Maple Square to 128?
I mean, this doesn't affect that, I guess, is the short, just period. Like, this change or anything doesn't affect already what's on the ground. But, I mean, the build-out analysis,
1,200.
I mean, the build-out,
Additional units?
Yeah.
We knew when we advertised that in 2020, because the MBTA Communities Act was on the table and was working through the legislature, we knew the number for our community was going to be 1,200, and that's what we shot for. And that's assuming that every developer comes in looking for the maximum. And again, it's anecdotal, it's worth the paper it's written on. We've had several conversations with property owners in the district who don't need to go to the maximum. You know, if I'm buying the property from you for top dollar, I might need to inquire about how to get the most out of my purchase. But if I have owned the property for a long time and it's paid for and I just want to do something that feels right, we've had several property owners come to us and say, where's that line between by right and special permit? And can this work for me? And we have had, until interest rates kind of went out of control, we had a couple of property owners in the district, I would say 3 conversations with folks who are like, no, that's a real sweet spot for me. That by right number looks really good to me. So again, we're hoping that some of those projects come through, in which case the 1,200 would not materialize.
And one other crossout, sorry, I didn't really write it down, but the maximum residential, maximum development that was struck out, and I have no idea what the density bonus requirement is, but that was all struck out in 22.7. Did that get moved?
that one did not get moved. That got out because it was restricting how big or small it could be, the size of the unit. I believe you could get a density based upon something else, which we can't regulate that under this law.
So we just took out any maximum?
Sorry?
So we just took out any maximum development size?
No, there's still, I mean, there are lots of things that are restricting, there's lots of things that are restricting the size of all of this. It was just simply the size of the unit, meaning you could,
Obviously, I didn't understand it, that's why I'm asking. And we struck out an entire section, and I didn't see it moved anywhere, and I didn't understand why.
that whole section was dealing with how big how big a dwelling unit could be. Okay? And all I'm saying is that we're not allowed to say how large something could be or how small a unit can be. If it's a 2-bedroom, it has to be this size. If it's 1-bedroom, it has to be this size. We had to take all of that out. That's what got taken out.
But there's still a 24, 36 units per acre cap that remains.
This has nothing to do with density.
Right.
Yeah. This has to do with the size of the unit.
And I think what was discussed with the select board, the height of the building, the massing of the building, that all remains the same. It's what happens inside of those structures, and they have to comply with all of the other ratios that are in place.
Let somebody else go.
Okay, no questions?
The only question I have is, what do we, I saw the reference to the rail trail grant. What else have we received, or have we received anything else from this? Or what would we be losing?
Yeah, a lot of small, I mean, the $1 million MassWorks grant that was applied for the extension of the rail trail is certainly I would say the largest grant that we've received that would fall under this, under the jurisdiction of this law. There's a project that we've been discussing very preliminarily having to do with some sewer upgrades that may be required over by the Liberty Tree Hospital area. That type of project, which needs to be done in order to unlock highest and best use of some of those properties, would be the perfect candidate for these types of grant programs. When you see in the news the big MassWorks announcements for street improvements or utility improvements or sewer improvements, those are the kinds of projects that end up in this. And I think one other thing that came up at the prior meeting. So I had mentioned, I think twice, that our planning department, our planning board has been rezoning district by district going back probably 25 or 30 years. Several industrial zones were updated prior to 2010. The 10 years between 2010 and 2020 were really focused on the downtown. They will move on most likely to looking at the commercial area over by Liberty Tree and the malls. And I think as part of that process and where we ended up in 2020, reference was made to communities that are resisting compliance with the MBTA law. Some of those communities are very small communities where they'd literally have to rewrite their entire zoning code to come into compliance with the law. And it's worth noting that the AG has telegraphed that they plan to force compliance with the law in those instances. So the purpose of the zoning is not to make the grants available, but I would note that we're 98% compliant with that law today. Failure to move us the next 2%, which really is just looking at the minimum density, and I've learned from these guys, few if any property owners come in and say, what's the minimum that I can do if I'm going to redevelop my property? We'll probably see few if any projects that come in and try to hit the minimum. And we're not changing anything but the minimums as part of this exercise, other than the parking ratios, which were spelled out in a different part of the law. So really, if full non-compliance was the goal, we'd almost have to rewind 8 years' worth of zoning in order to be fully non-compliant. We're already 98% compliant. And the changes that staff has walked through bring us the rest of the way with the regulations that were issued after the town meeting approved the zoning in 2020.
Thanks.
Eric?
Just a couple questions. One is, I'm intrigued on what I heard about enforcement after the fact and the challenge that has. So I'm just thinking, what mechanisms do we have on the front end that protect us, Aaron, that you referenced? Once someone gets in there, now, chasing behind someone to be compliant, what are the tools that we have or strategy we have to not get in that situation again?
Well, I'd say with like a Maple Square right now, I mean, we meet, not me personally, but staff has a meeting every 2 weeks on site with the contractors. We meet regularly or I'll say probably every 6 to 8 weeks. There's a separate meeting we have with the development team. And I think that's for better, for worse. It's a little bit of a heavy lift, but it's a huge project and we need to make sure we get it done right. And I think because of the sensitivity and the compactness of downtown, that's really the model for that going forward. Even if it's a 16-unit development, it's still going to require that sort of attention. And we don't have so many projects happening in town anymore that we can kind of set it and forget it. So I just anticipate us having a much stronger infrastructure around that, making sure as we go forward, that we're clarifying in our decisions what we need to say. We knew what we thought we meant, and then it kind of got implemented a little bit differently than what we meant. So those are lessons learned, and those will be incorporated going forward. Enforcement's the hardest piece of it. No one likes being the bad guy, and unfortunately, it's what we get paid the big bucks to do. So that's what we're going to have to do. And
close the loophole on the front end.
Yeah.
So then my other point, I think town manager referenced it, in a lot of the work that I do, conversations about affordable housing it's in every conversation in any level in state government. So I don't think that we should be hesitant on moving the needle for that last 2%, because I do think what comes next in order for the Commonwealth to move where it needs on affordable housing is going to follow this model. So I think we need to definitely continue our forward progress. It is in every conversation where I go to where elected officials are present, there's a conversation about affordable housing, and the statements coming out of the out of the State House, both the governor's office and lieutenant governor's office suggest, the attorney general's office, the strategies to get us to be communities that are moving in this direction are, I think this is really the tip of the iceberg, and I just wanted to flag that for us as a community. We cannot fall behind. It is only going to be more and more necessary. So, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I think I heard you say 142 units in that area? Is that the Maple
For
Square?
Maple Square, yeah.
Say that again?
Yeah, Maple Square, it's about 142, 145.
How many of those are 2 and 3 bedroom?
I believe 6 of them are 3-bedroom, and the vast majority, it's like 80 to 85% of them are studios and 1s.
All right. And none of them are condo units, right? I mean, they're not for sale, it's just pure
They're,
rent.
they're all rental.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're apartments.
Okay, and it's just a little mind-boggling for me when you talk about parking. What is a half a unit? In today's day and age, with the vehicles I see around there, some of these people are driving school buses, they don't even know it.
So if you think of an overall ratio of 1.5, so for instance, for 10 units, they would create 15 spaces.
So not every unit is going to be necessarily deeded or in your lease will say that you have access to a parking space.
No, I mean, it could be.
I mean, they could.
But the point, it's a ratio, it's not a half a space, it's a ratio of the total. So if-
everybody gets one, some people get two.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the Pollocks are a one-car family when they move in.
Have been for years.
And you have been for a long time. You don't need both spaces, but, you know, Connie probably likes 2 bedrooms.
Not get personal.
You know, so, for active,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
let me finish.
go ahead.
All right, so basically, well, you really got me flustered.
I thought Mike Landers was here for a minute.
There'll be some retribution.
I'm sure.
What happens when, now you're trying to encourage, and I understand, I'm in favor, I've always been in favor of the project, I'm puzzled by the parking, and I really am, because on one hand, you're gonna have 142 units of this, that, and the other, so you get a family comes in, couple, maybe each of them has a car, all right, and I'm looking up there, and you're saying 3 bedrooms, 1.5 units, all right? Now, family comes in with married couple, comes in, and maybe they have 2, adolescents that drive. So where are these people gonna park? I just, to me, it's mind-boggling. Now, let me just take it a little bit further, and I'm for this, don't get me wrong, this is not, I'm just trying to get answers to my own questions. On the first level, you want businesses. So the street,
And that has a parking requirement, right? I mean, Maple Square has, I'm going to say 8,000 square feet of commercial on the first floor. There's they have to build parking spaces for that 8,000 square feet. On
Where are they
top of
building?
whatever they're doing for the residential above.
in behind, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so you're also gonna have parking on the street, right?
There was parking there before.
Currently,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, it's not changing.
Now, it's gonna be both on Hobart, right, and Maple. Yes?
I'm not sure how much parking was between North Putnam and the firehouse on that side of the street.
Yeah.
I don't believe there
There
were
was
any
no
parking
parking there.
spaces there.
Yeah.
I don't think there was parking before.
There was some parking in front of Corner Grocer,
Oh, yeah.
and there was parking
Yes,
across in
yes.
front of the
Absolutely.
freight house.
Because Maple is a mess, when you really think about it. If you've got all those people living there with cars, and they all come out of that area and somehow go left on Maple to get to 62, good luck. Because that intersection is a total mess if you try to take that route and look over your right shoulder and your left shoulder to see what's coming down. And it may be something that the traffic folks have to work on. Because really, I don't know how many of you do it.
You're speaking about up the hill?
Yeah. You know, I'm not trying to get off, I apologize. But,
Maple and Poplar, the intersection up at the top of the hill is what
yeah,
you're talking
yeah,
about?
that's real hard.
That's a bad intersection today.
Yeah, I mean, so, but my point is, and then And then when, again, like I said, I'm for this, but I'm just trying to figure out, we're bringing a lot of cars into town. What happens when you get a snow call? No one can park on the street. So and I imagine there's probably a 1 or 2 hour limit, isn't there, as to how long you can park on the street?
I don't think we're allowing anybody to park on the street as part of their,
No, I mean, you certainly, as a residential part, you can't park on it, but you're just talking about parking restrictions on the street. That's fluid. So a few years, it's not static. If things are not working in a specific way, we listen to businesses. I mean, we change every few years to try to work with town. But, I mean, to your point, like, they have to park it, meaning whatever ratio that they get, the planning board approves, they have to build and adhere to it. And if they don't, basically it's back to this zoning enforcement, which is, my favorite part of the job.
And Paul, can I say a couple of things? So
Sure.
just to be clear, when we talk about assigning parking place, that we have a zoning book that says if you're building X units, you have to provide X number of parking spaces. So if to oversimplify it, if you're doing 10 two-bedrooms, you have to put 15 parking places somewhere on your own property. You can't point to the lot across the street and say, I'm counting those.
Right.
Now, with Maple Square, you add in commercial, and if, depending on the type of use, a certain number of parking spaces have to be created for that as well. So the building that's being built today that's oriented toward the street, most of what's going to get developed last behind that is parking, in addition to the lower parcel that they've acquired on the opposite side of North Putnam is going to be additional parking. So they're required, in order to get their project approvals, parking. If the Pollacks move down there, the lease you sign is, the town is not party to that. We've required the project to create a certain number of parking spaces. How the property owner allocates those is that's a private transaction. Mr. Henry alluded to an issue we're having with one property downtown where an approval was provided, and then the property owner went and entered leases and promised more parking spaces than were available on site. That's something that has to be managed. That's not a flaw in the zoning, that's a flaw in the execution of the project after the approval was provided. In terms of the traffic on Maple, that's kind of outside the scope, and you alluded to that, that's outside of the scope of what we're talking about. That's something that would go before DTAC when there are issues in town with one-ways and parking and stop signs and speed and things of that nature. That goes through DTAC. And I want to say real broadly, because this has come up probably 20 times in the 10 years I've been here, most of the congestion that we have in our downtown is not a result of local business and local traffic. When the state redesigned 128 to solve a safety issue that they were having up on the highway, they went from a cloverleaf pattern, which allowed traffic to move very freely through the town of Danvers, to a diamond pattern, which solved all of the problems that the state was having with that area and shifted all those problems to Danvers. So whether we do anything or not, we're still living with the consequences of that. And that's a conversation that we've been having ongoing with the state. They invested a whole lot of money in the redesign, so they are not particularly interested in tearing it up and doing something totally different. The efforts to date have largely involved the timing of traffic signals. We've communicated pretty clearly in certain areas that's not been sufficient. So that's a conversation that will be ongoing for a long, long time. But that congestion is going to be there whether or not we empty the downtown or build 3 projects like Maple Square. That's a separate issue that is important and has to be addressed. But it kind of runs concurrently with what we're talking about.
Okay, good luck. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
As part of my
Just grab a microphone.
I also am the chairman of the Affordable Housing Committee, so this project came before us. And I just want to say, a lot of people try to wrap their head around the 2 bedrooms, 1.5 parking. That's the average. If you want the corner unit on the top floor and 2 parking spots, you're going to pay more than if you're a single unit, a 2-bedroom in the middle. That's negotiated as part of your rental. It's not all things being the same, because not all apartments and rentals are going to be the same. It's going to be the responsibility of the management company to not oversell the number of parking spots. But you, the Pollacks, might go and say, yeah, I want a 2-bedroom,
and I want here on this part of the property, and I only have one car, you're going to pay less than another two-bedroom apartment that's going to have two cars. So it's self-managed by the management company. That's how it's going to be managed in consideration.
And they, in turn, have to handle any discrepancies,
It's their responsibility.
okay?
Comments, questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am?
Hello. My name is Lauren. I live on Carter Street. Sorry, I have bad public speaking skills. I like my neighborhood and where I live. I'm a very close neighbor to the Maple Square project. My street is very busy. In addition to all the construction going on, it has the Maple Street Church, the nursery school, the senior living facility, Cherry Street Fish Market, which is always very busy, other businesses and restaurants on Hobart Street, and then everything along the Danvers Square, and the rail trail. People also use it as a cut-through from Maple to Hobart. Once the project is complete, with increased traffic, my street will become busier than it is now, and I fear it will be an overflow parking lot for the many apartments across the street. I understand the Maple Street project is a done deal. However, I am here to remind you that people live in the neighborhood where the MBTA Act plans to build and add more density. You're increasing density and allotting an unrealistic number of parking spaces. 1.5 spaces for a three-bedroom plus apartment is unrealistic. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 cars in different areas. A 2-bedroom apartment can have 4 cars. Like, if you want you talk about affordable housing, well, affordable housing is also sharing units with other couples or other people, so a lot of cars can accumulate. I just want you to remember the current residents of Danvers first. As someone who lives in the town center zone, I do not wish to live in a constant state of construction until Massachusetts says that we have enough density to appease them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Mr. Bradstreet.
Again, Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting, member Precinct 1. Do we have a spot in the square where we can put an ugly parking building to solve the parking? Just a question.
Parking garage.
An ugly-looking
We own
parking
what?
garage. Some
Mr. Bradstreet, we own probably, 5 surface parking lots downtown?
Can we build them up?
Sure.
Will that answer the problem about
You do it
parking?
down
I would not, that was not an expenditure I think we would make,
It's about
but
$130K per space construction costs, so do the math.
it's a lot.
Maybe 100K now, but certainly not less than 100K per space for construction. There's people in the audience that might have a better estimate, but
It's
it's
expensive.
about what it is.
Yep.
You understand I'm being facetious about the parking in
I
the
don't-
square.
I don't know.
It is a
Maybe you wanna build a
problem
parking lot.
now, and it'll only be a bigger problem when all of this is done. And again, an ugly-looking parking building might be the answer. Might not be pretty.
Right now, we don't have over 85% occupancy in our downtown parking lots. Maybe we hit that once or twice a year right now. So again, I think this is, as Brian was talking about earlier, with the fluidity of how this is going to roll out. And again, the zoning that this overwrote never got to build out, right? It was on the books for over 75 years, and we never saw I-1 come to fruition. We never saw C-1 come to fruition. We never saw C-1A come to fruition. Interest rates, it's been 7 years since the adoption of the 40R, and we've had one project come forward. So again, I think the reality is that this zoning is not going to happen overnight. We don't expect these changes to push any developer over the top. Interest rates are still very high, and property owners are still hesitant to dive in. I don't think that you're going to see the wrecking ball come through downtown as a result of this change. But I hear what you're saying about parking, and we have what many municipalities wish they had, which is good land downtown where we have options in the future, should that be needed.
My concern is, at my age, I'm not going to be around to have to deal with this. I'm concerned for the people who will outlive me and how they're going to deal with it. That's my concern. I'll be gone. Thank you.
Mr. Morose?
Hello, Jim Morose, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. Yeah, I got a laundry list a mile long. I'll try to be brief, but, you know, I'm just highly concerned with the trend I'm seeing, you know, like, I call it one size fits all, coming from the state, from the size, the height of fence to traffic patterns on 128 and 62, with 128 and 35, and this MBTA zoning, and I could go on. But, and again, as the planning board pointed out, a lot of cities and towns are blindsided by this MBTA zoning. They have to start from scratch, and it's a big impact on them. But we have already done the damage, okay? We did it back in 2020. And so, in the fruit of that is the Maple Street, as Lauren pointed out. A lot of people, you know, are really upset about that. Even though we did have meetings back in 2020 about that, a lot of people weren't happy. But we passed it, and now they get to see what we just passed. And so they think this is going to be worse, but like, again, the planning board and everyone said, we've already done 98% of the damage, what the heck, let's do the other 2%. But, again, for what? So, all I'm saying is, and again, as a town meeting member, I talk to my, you know, the citizens, the residents, and they're not really happy about any of this, okay? But we're doing it, so I think that's it. And again, going back to, again, all these demands are mandates and laws coming from the state. You know, we do have state senators and state reps. I mean, are they working with us, you know, saying, oh, guess what, we're going to pass this law, it's going to make you do all this stuff? Are they coming back and telling you what's happening ahead of time and working with you? I mean, how many man-hours has been spent, you know, 4 years ago in 2020, trying to guess what the zoning is going to be, and then even in this Warrant article here, numerous man-hours and strategic workshops and everything else, working to get all this done. You know, talk about budget cuts, but that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Jim. Lou? While Lou's going to the podium, I'd just like to take a moment and say I've lived in Danvers Square my entire life, and while there are certainly inconveniences because I can't park direct, or customers can't always park directly in front of the store they're going into, I have never seen, in all of my travels through the square every day, a genuine parking problem. You may have to walk a tenth of a mile, but you're probably still walking less from your parking space to the store you're going to than if you went to the mall and had to go into somewhere in the mall from your parking space at the mall to wherever you're going to at the mall in most circumstances. So while we are inconvenienced because we can't park right in front, I would much rather have what we have with a little bit of walking in most instances than a series of mini malls up and down High Street and Maple Street. So, Lou.
Great, thank you. Louis George, I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 1. I'm also a member of the planning board, and so I live in close proximity to downtown. I actually live near the middle school. My wife and I do, and born and raised in Danvers. And we had several hearings on this, multiple hearings at the planning board related to this. And as was mentioned, as staff was mentioned, I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but we are, as I said, we are like 98% there in terms of the zoning that was done in 2020, really, for the most part, got it right. And frankly, I believe that it does meet a need in terms of with respect to housing, particularly affordable housing as well. And it'll also serve, I believe, to help, revitalize the downtown as well by providing people who live, work in the downtown, being able to walk to destinations in the downtown. So as a member of the planning board, I voted in favor of this, and I definitely support this. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else? Mr. Bates.
Good evening. Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. Happy New Year to the Finance Committee, and as always, thank you for your service to the town.
Thank you.
As a town meeting member, I'm excited. I supported what we did to allow residential downtown. Our laws didn't allow residential. You couldn't have an apartment on Maple Street. And what we were left with was hot lot and old buildings. This is progress. Keep in mind, we talked about, you mentioned 3-bedroom apartments. There are 6 of them in that whole big unit. 6. So they're 85%, as they mentioned, 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. Give it a chance. We need to make, we're talking about the MBTA zoning. Let's not go back what we did 10 years ago. We need to do this so that we meet the standards, so that we can get the grants. It's not asking a lot. And, parking, there are places that they have tons of parking spots and they have nobody there. That happens in town after town. We're trying to build our downtown as far as it being an economic engine and a place for people to live. So I think we're heading in the right direction, and I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, did you have something?
My name is Mike Morris. I'm what precinct I'm in now. I'm a town meeting member, been everywhere. Precinct 8. And I have 2 things to say. One, I think that we really need to insist upon our legislators, if truly this is an MBTA project, to insist either train service and/or bus service come back to town so that those people that do not have cars are in there. I'm also trying to dream up how this could be enforced, and I'm kind of thinking it would be enforced through the town assessor. If we could somehow get where their excise tax bills were audited by address every month or every quarter, and then have a review done of those, of how many excise tax bills were going to those addresses, we could then determine how many cars were associated with that project, and then use that as enforcement with the property owners and the property managers to have them either have a come to Jesus meeting with their residents and/or start a fine on them that they have diluted the town, because you could then have those cars parked where CR lives or on Central Ave or somewhere. I think you really need to do it by address. So I really think that soliciting the help of the assessor would be where you could have an audit done and keep track of all those cars. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Anything else from the audience? Is there a motion on Article 8?
Move Article 8.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Article passes. Article 9.
Before Article 9, a couple of general updates that I wanted to share at the beginning, but I'll do it now before we get to the housekeeping item. The first is that the recommendations tonight will make their way to the town meeting on February 5th. But prior to town meeting on February 5th, there are 2 more optional, for lack of a better term, events scheduled. An email went out today from the town clerk to all town meeting members, and on the town calendar, you'll find what I'm about to describe, and then we'll also be pushing this on social media. But on Saturday, January 27th, from 9 a.m. to noon, staff will be in the Toomey Room at Town Hall. It'll be an informal drop-in session for any town meeting members who want to come and have in-depth conversations with staff or ask questions. town meeting is a very formal affair, and sometimes it's helpful to be able to have one-on-one conversations with staff to better understand what all of this means. So that's available to any town meeting members who want to join us for that. And the town moderator has decided on, to hold office hours on February 1st, which is a Thursday, from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., depending on how many folks choose to take advantage of that, also at Town Hall in the Toomey Room. So Saturday the 27th, 9 to noon, and Thursday, February 1st, from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. for town meeting members who want to have conversations outside of a venue like this about anything that they're hearing about. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff for the final article.
All right, so this is Article 9, housekeeping. So this was kind of a broad article that touched a lot of different sections. We ended up hiring a zoning attorney to help us basically bring this up to date in terms of state law, but also relevant case law. Using that, so I'm going to boringly go through each section here, and I'm going to try to go very quickly. The mantra here is that we're not trying to change any policy, and we're just trying to make things clear and concise. In Section 1, Purpose and Application, this is getting stricken to be relevant for current case law, because you can't use the conservation of value of land and structures as part of a court case. General provisions. So these are all the sections in Section 3 that we touched. Basically, all the language has been updated and condensed so that it reads more clearly. No policy changes here at all for Section 3. Section 4, site plan review. This technically is a policy change, but it is now just keeping in consistent with other cities and towns in Massachusetts, is that site plan review previously was a public meeting. Now it's going to be a public hearing with actual notice to abutters with a legal advertisement. Sections 9 and 10. So other accessory uses are allowed, provided the definition of accessory use. It turns out that this was, the words were mixed up, and this is now correcting that. Section 10 is condensing language to allow the planning board to waive requirements in Section 10, including reduction in parking. They've always been allowed to. This is just changing the language by condensing it. We talked about this earlier, but like all the affordable housing sections are now kind of condensed into one section. And then there were 2 instances where we replaced building commissioner with zoning administrator, as previously the building commissioner and zoning administrator was the same person. So we've now split that apart. Just said that. This is not a policy change, but certainly the words are changing related to the requirements for a special permit. So it is, it's something, meaning that it is not the same exact words that the zoning board used to go through the special permit. However, these 6 things are in line with the policy of what they used to use as a frame of reference. The frame of reference generally is it negative towards the environment, negative towards the neighborhood, using these 6 things. I just have to, is it negatively affecting the traffic? Is it negative affecting the community needs? The size and scale and design of other structures in the neighborhood, impacts on the natural environment, and any potential fiscal impact to the town. Couple other changes of building commissioner to zoning administrator, and then moved current signage was very similar to affordable housing in the fact that there were many different signage bylaws. So now we've just condensed all of those signage bylaws into one section, section 37. And definitions. So there was not there was a really bad definition of self-storage facility or warehouse, and we basically found a lot of developers were kind of gaming this. So we're just now separating them and having a self-storage facility to be so it's very clear that a self-storage facility is not a commercial warehouse, because under this, it was kind of viewed as the same, and they're very different uses. This is a policy change that's kind of strange. In 114A, you weren't allowed to do any restaurant takeout, which is pretty much all restaurant takeout there anyway, so we're just zoning for what's on the ground there. And again, decoupling that warehouse and self-storage facility. Just a couple more, sorry if I'm going a little quicker. Accessory use height, so this basically has to do with sheds and garages. Currently, it's 10 feet that you have to, it has to be 10 feet or less, and we're just increasing that to 20 because it basically didn't make any sense. Most people are not building sheds and garages that are only 10 feet tall. And there was an or and switch that was incorrect in the use table. So this allows you to build a 120 square feet shed 5 feet from your property line. So it has to be both 120 square feet and less than 10 feet. If you do both of those things, then you can get 5 feet from your property line. So it's always been viewed as that, but the words actually was an or. So we're just saying that it has to be and. And that is all I have for housekeeping. The state is currently reviewing their proposed zoning changes, and we should hopefully have something by February 5th outlining that everything is ready to go. Even if it's not, there still will be some type of qualifying language when they do send us like an approval letter that it still has to see whatever happens at town meeting. And that's all I have for housekeeping.
Paul?
No question.
Eric?
No questions.
No questions.
No, no questions.
Wally?
No questions, but who is a special permit granting authority?
The special permit granting authority is the planning board and the zoning board here. So it's the, only in the downtown, the planning board is the special permit granting authority, so just for the downtown. But everywhere else, the ZBA is the SPGA.
Zero questions.
Okay, great. Anything from the audience? Mr. Bates?
Planning board does clusters. I think the planning board does cluster development, but we haven't had one in 30 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Getting back to the Table 2 dimensions, in attending some of the planning board meetings, a staff member had talked about Table 2 dimensions, that a garage could no longer be 30 feet. Would you expand on that? It was a comment made that without this, somebody could build a 30-foot garage. But I don't understand how that comment was made, and if it's accurate. Through you, Mr. Chairman.
I think what you're talking about is, so currently your garage, which is an accessory structure, didn't really have a height listed in the table of uses, listed in the table of dimensional requirements. What that means is that you could build a house up to 30 feet, and you could build potentially a garage 10 feet from your property line up to 30 feet. This, in practice, never, like, people are generally not building garages the same height as houses. This corrects that to say that that a garage is an accessory structure, and that if it's more than 20 feet, you will need relief from that. I don't know what the staff member said, so I just.
Well, it was you. It was you at the planning board meeting that said that if before this, you could build a 30-foot garage. And my comment, I came up at the planning board and said, well, what's wrong with that? If somebody wants to, why? And my real problem is, are we really calling it housekeeping if we're taking a right from somebody building a 30-foot garage down to a 20-foot garage?
But that's just inside of a certain setback, Bill. So, right, well, I think what we're saying is that if you want the height, you got to put it in the middle of the lot, as opposed to we allow accessory structures to get closer to a lot line, but we generally do that. The height's coming down as you getting closer to a lot line. I think why it's housekeeping is that what we've realized is there's a potential loophole where it's an accessory structure subject to reduced setbacks, but they can add the height as if it were a principal setback, principal structure. So what this is clarifying is that from 10 feet to 30 feet on the lot, there is a height limit for that accessory structure, and that height limit's going to be 20 feet, not the 35,
Depending on which zone you're in,
yeah, depending on what zone you're in.
But I still don't think that we're taking anything away. Right now, it reads as if you could do a 10-foot garage, and it doesn't make sense because most people are not building 10-foot tall garages. They're building 20-foot tall garages.
Right, but and if somebody wanted to build a 30-foot garage, they could still do it, but they have to ask, would it be a special permit, or is it not allowed?
No, they could do 30 feet if they're certain a distance away from the lot line.
Good, okay, thank you, that's fine.
Anything else? Is there a motion?
Motion to move the question.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That concludes our meeting this evening. We'll see you all February 5th at